Today is December 28th, 2022, and this video is about my personal views about the homeless shelter crisis problem. And yes, what I want to talk about the homeless shelter is about, I hear all type of stories goes on about the homeless shelter because there was a storm hit my city, and if this storm had hit my city, I more likely would have had moved into one at the end of this month if I didn't secure an apartment and the landlord decided to give me up to the end of January to find another apartment, or if I don't have another apartment by then, I might have to end up moving into one. And some of the stories I hear about these homeless shelters is a lot of them are religion, faith based, and like a lot of times and stuff, a lot of people and like a lot of people talk about there be a lot of death going on, a lot of crime. Like some people like I had read up, some people had put in a comment section about some of these homeless shelter. The staffs be rude. Sometimes the staff steal. People be stealing out of these homeless shelter for other people. A lot of times it's a lot of drug addicts in there, a lot of like mental health people in there, and a lot of times it's a lot of criminals in there. All type of variety of things what goes on in these homeless shelter. So I would like to that's one of the reasons why I had moved out of Buffalo, because I was going to move down to West Virginia. And if I would have moved down there, I was going to stay in a homeless shelter. That was one of the part reasons why I didn't move down there, because I didn't want to go in the homeless shelter. And if something would have had happened, I would more likely have to came back to Buffalo if I didn't have no houses found down there. Because they usually supposed to help you find houses. I don't know if that's true, it's the truth or not. But this one lady I know, she been in a homeless shelter for 5 years since 2018, and they still hadn't found her no house yet. But I don't know the backbone of her story. But I know I know a lot of people at these homeless shelters have bed bugs and stuff sometimes, and there's a lot of mental illness coming in there, and there's a lot of people be doing drugs in there, and there's a lot of crime goes on in these homeless shelter, and there's a lot of I heard a lot of the employees who work there, sometimes they are rude, and sometimes they had steal. Well, some people had, so they had steal as well. Like some of these homeless shelters also charge money as well to stay there. Like if you get into a fight with one of those employees, or if you got caught stealing, they kick you out the shelter and stuff. And that was another reason why I didn't want to move there, because if there was an incident broke out between me and another homeless person, or if I was accused of stealing something or had an incident with a staff member, I would be forced to leave, and I don't want to sleep on the streets. And that was another reason why I didn't go into one of them when I wanted to move down to West Virginia. Luckily, I'm still in this apartment, so I'm trying to secure another apartment before the end of January, for which that can avoid me from actually moving into one of them. And see, a lot of these homeless shelter also faith-based. Like a lot of times they want to, like a lot of these homeless shelter, they wake you up in the morning. Some people have said they preach the word Jesus Christ, but you can't preach that Jesus to somebody who got severe mental illness or a serious drug addict. They rather sleep under the bridge and hear the word Jesus. Like some of these homeless shelter is faith-based, where they got people who in these homeless shelters work there. They want to preach the gospel, and they act like everybody who went homeless somehow it was their fault. But it wasn't. Some people may went homeless because of the rent went up on them and stuff, or the cost of living, or loss of their jobs and stuff like that. And not everybody is Christian, and they don't want to hear the word Jesus Christ. Not everybody. And stuff like that, because you can't preach that to a person with a severe mental health problem, or a person who's a serious drug addict. They don't want to hear that stuff. Like people with those type of problems, and a lot of times they try to preach all that. Like sometimes they try to get you to go through their program, which is some Christian program, where they can try to get you. They can try to hook you up with houses where you hooked up with some agency, which they pay your rent, half of your rent, and you pay the other part. And then another thing is, another reason I didn't want to go to the homeless shelter was because if I'm in there, cause I get disability like SSI and stuff, I will lose my SSI if I don't have an address. That's another reason I didn't want to go to one of these homeless shelters when I wanted to move down to West Virginia, because I didn't have a house, like apartments secure for me if I can just move there instead of going to the shelter. And a lot of times, a lot of these homeless shelters now is so damn full. Now people have to sleep on the streets because the affordable cost of living and the rent prices went off the motherfucking roof in this country. and SSI not giving the people enough money. But I believe SSI should get everybody at least like up to nearly, or Social Security up at least like $1,500 maximum for you could have money to afford a $700 or $800 apartment. I mean, getting up to money like up to $900 something ain't gonna cover it. We need at least like a maximum of $1,500 to cover rent, like a $700 to $800 in a country where the rent prices keep going up. I have a friend who lives in the Buffalo Melissa housing thing, and he said he been living over there for 20 something years. He said his rent is $250, and he told me how he saw all these private places. The rent went up on all these private places, and he said his rent never went up. And he saw how the homeless problem had got worse with the cost of living. He said his rent had never went up, and while he saw so many people had lost their houses and stuff because of the cost of living, because the building I'm living in, right, the original landlord has sold it. I mean, the original landlord's sons had sold it back in 2018, because the original landlord died in 2012. That was 10 years ago. But his sons took over and they sold it in 2018 to this new guy, and he's been bothering me for the past 2 years to find another place and stuff. And doing it in the middle of a pandemic too. I'm gonna talk about that in my next video. But like I was saying about the homeless shelter crisis problem is, man. I just heard people have said a lot of stuff like on the internet, a lot of reviews and stuff. And I just heard about this, a lot of stealing, a lot of drug addicts being there and stuff. It's just a very toxic, unhealthy, unsafe environment to be in these homeless shelters. And some of these homeless shelters, I think they in it for the money, because a lot of times they pay no donation like for the charities and stuff. And some of these homeless counselors, people and stuff, like a lot of people, like a lot of homeless advocates, people and stuff, I heard a lot of them make a lot of money too, trying to help people get housing. A lot of them be involved in making money too. I think there's a lot of money people are making off these homeless. And another way, that's what they have been talked about on the news, and I think that's true. Because these homeless shelters seem like they only depends on getting money. Some don't charge people, some don't get donations from charity or the state. There's one guy who up in Binghamton, he posted about how he was living in a homeless shelter up there, and he said they deducted some money out of his SSI account, and he posted about watch your money and stuff. I mean, but these homeless shelters, a lot of them are religion, faith-based, and not everybody is Christian, including not me. Because there's one guy I was talking to in West Virginia, he was telling about this one homeless shelter he was staying in. They wake you up early in the morning, and they want you to read the gospel, the Bible, and all this. So he went to a different homeless shelter, and not every single body man is Christian. I mean, not everybody want to hear the word of Jesus. Because this Jesus guy, he ain't stopping the rise of the rent. He ain't stopping the cost of living. I mean, he's not stopping all this rise of mental health, drug addict problems, and all that stuff. He ain't stopping all that stuff. Most people don't want to hear about that shit and stuff. That's how I look at it, like me. I mean, but do these homeless shelters help people get houses? I guess some of them depend. I guess you may have to go through some of their programs. And that's how I think. I think some of them help and some of them don't help. I heard about so many people got kicked out of these homeless shelters for stupid reasons, but I don't know the backstory to it. But it could be like a lot of these drug addicts and stuff. A lot of them get kicked out of there, especially if they got caught stealing or doing drugs in there. But it's just not a safe environment. But I mean, I had to give my landlord credit for giving me up to another month to stay here. I'm doing everything I can to try to find another apartment before the end of January, because that's one place I wanted the boy going to as a homeless shelter. And that's all I got to say about that.